This time, Peru 1970s, more than just a pretty kit.
'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the impossible to rank once and for all who is the greatest team of all time. My name's Graham Dunn, making the case as ever for the brilliant Oxford United, and over there in the corner, unbelievably face-to-face, is the king of the data, Jamie Rooney.
Yeah, literally in the corner. And for the first time ever, face-to-face. I mean, we love the 1970s World Cup so much. We thought we just got to embrace everything, including being in the same room at the same time. It's finally happened. It's taken us almost 100 episodes, but here we are, sharing a space.
Yeah, it's quite surreal, and it's quite. We're breaking lots of taboos there. So we are face to face, which is odd. And so, if at times it doesn't appear like we know where we're looking, it's partly because we're not used to actually looking at each other in face to face, and also we're doing this in the day. I think it's our first daytime pod.
It literally is. I mean, if only this was the permanent job. Yeah, the full-time job. Yeah, and this obviously for you guys watching on YouTube, thank you so much. Graham literally is that much taller than me in real life, so it's not any camera trickery. He's literally face to face, way taller. I am just a tiny, teeny person.
I mean, that is true. Although I think maybe I think I've benefited from the position of my camera, haven't I? Maybe I'll push my laptop a fraction, but I'll sit back. I'll sit back like Cyril Fletcher or Roald Dahl in Tales
Wow. I mean, is that going to be the first mention of politics tonight?
So yes, this is a super exciting one. Not only because we are face to face here in what we're now renaming the studio. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I think so. It's we've got our colours behind us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But it also because we are doing Peru 1970s. Peru is what we're focusing on, and I mean, I won't lie to you. When we were talking about possible teams, and I was you went all about Peru 1970s. Oh yeah, it's a great team. But I went solely on the kit. It's all to do with the kit.
And why wouldn't you? I mean, it is one of the most iconic kits I think there's ever been, and hopefully we can make a mini discussion about kits. But this is a whole period as well. We're going to touch on not only the World Cup, but colour television. And I think Peru's kit really just arrived at the right World Cup at the right time in 1970 when colour TV was global for the first time. You got the beautiful yellow of Brazil, but you got this iconic sash of Peru, based on like the River Plate team, I think we did as well.
Yes,
in the 1950s.
Yeah. Well, in fact, bearing in mind that we have done Crystal Palace a couple of weeks ago before, and even the mighty Oxford United, who in 2020 had a sash. We all kind of have become sash specialists on this podcast.
Yeah, I know. And with Oxford and Crystal Palace, obviously they're away kits. Shame for Crystal Palace. I don't know about Oxford. I mean, the sash is a new thing, but that Crystal Palace dual colour sash is fantastic. And, you kind of wish that was their home kit more permanently. But
yeah, I mean, I always thought it was their home kit. And I don't know at what stage. And I think when I first started following football, it was that brief period where it was almost their home kit. And I only ever think of them wearing that shirt. But, that's, a thing of beauty. So we are going to delve a little bit into the world of the kit. But also there's lots of stuff around this side. And I think because this is probably the first, obviously it's the first, but possibly the only time I'm going to hazard a guess that we do the Peru national team on this podcast, I thought it was worth touching on a bit of their broader kind of history. And so we're going to look at the 70s, but the kind of 1930s is a big era for this side as well, isn't it?
Yeah, they win their first of two Copa Americas. It wasn't called the Copa America when they won it in 1939. It was actually the South American Championships. Goes all the way back to the 1920s. Football in Peru goes back to the turn of the century. Like many countries in South America, brought to the Peruvians by the Brits, big British influence, adopted by the working classes. So the same stories that we get where football is taken off in many parts of the world. Peru didn't become professional until the 1950s, but in the 1930s, they had a bit of a mini period. So yeah, they won their South American Championship on home soil. It's worth noting that neither Brazil or Argentina took part in that tournament, and the great Uruguayans put a second string team out. But a victory is a victory, and we've discussed this with Benedict. Remember Benedict when we did the Austrian team in the 1930s, similar period. Peru and Austria obviously met in the Berlin Olympics in the summer football tournament.
Yeah, I mean, it's something, this is going to become something of a theme of the podcast and it is quite interesting, these two periods of success for Peru also coincide with some quite controversial moments in some quite controversial countries at the time. Now, the 1936 Olympics, obviously in Berlin, and Peru, they are playing Austria, and it's not, I don't think it's quite, it's not the Wunder team as such, is it? That
no,
Austrian team.
As we established when we did the Wunder team with Benedict, it was a completely different Austrian team. It wasn't the special team that we've covered on this particular podcast. It was an amateur team, and at 1930s, Austrian football was professional already, and the Olympics was strictly amateur at that moment. So Peru weren't taking on the greats of the Austrians. They were taking on a second string team or third string team, however you want to put it. And Peru won the game 4-2 in added time and should have gone through to the semi-finals. But as we discussed, there was some protests. There was some things that went on the pitch that the Austrians didn't take kindly to. They put a protest into FIFA. Peru had a chance to reply, but they missed their opportunity to turn up, a mix-up in the calendars. So therefore, there was no reply from Peru. So FIFA awarded a replay, of which then the Peruvians decided.
They decided, we're having no part in this. We're gonna walk at this stage. And I think you sort of, I do like this about this era, is that, but South American football and European football, but everything's kind of developing at this point, but they are a bit prone to blanking each other's tournaments, and if something goes wrong or they don't like, they do sort of one out, all out.
I think it would have been more to logistics as well. I think we touched on this previously. Yeah, because you're right. I think it was Peru decided to boycott the games, and then all athletes from all of South America decided to join Peru. I think quite possibly on the boat back to South America, because air travel in the 90s wasn't as, this is as a professional airline journalist, it wasn't something that you could do a convenient way. So boats were pretty much the form of travel. So I think it was a case of, well, the Peruvians are going back. We want to make sure we're not chartering a different boat. Let's just jump on their boat with those guys. And so I think Colombia, Argentina, Ecuador, Paraguay, Brazil, I think all the athletes in the Summer Olympics decided to leave.
They probably only could catch that one boat. So certainly the boat is leaving. First team out is out, and off you go. That game is obviously really bizarre. It's 2-2, and then there's I think Peru score 5 goals in extra time, 3 of which are disallowed, and then the game is finished. They win 4-2, but before there's a pitch invader, and Austrian players attacked, and various bits and pieces. And it's totally plausible, and none of us were there, so none of us can really fully identify. But the suggestion is that the Peruvian fan had attacked the Austrian players. Now, I'm not entirely sure how the Peruvian fans got there. It's not obvious that there'd be a lot of Peruvian fans in Austria at the time. And obviously, you add to this that we are talking about Nazi Germany at the time. Germany had already exited the competition. I think all eyes were on Austria as the next favoured country as far as Hitler was concerned. Now, this is before the annexation of Austria, so this is an earlier stage, but there was definitely a view that Austria were the favoured choice. And certainly in Peru, their conspiracy lives on. I think there was a TV series made about it. It's a sort of a thing that has continued to cause controversy.
Indeed, and quite possibly the last time we will mention controversy on this particular episode. I mean,
I don't see a major tournament with the dictator controversy cropping up. Yes, so that 1930s Peru side. The other thing that happens in that period is the birth of the sash. So the sash arrives. So that, because the very first Peru kit, they just play in white.
yeah, I mean, I've tried to find out the origins of the sash, and I've struggled. It's very difficult. If somebody knows out there, that'd be great. Let us know the origins of the sash. And the sash, as we know, is a rare thing. We've already spoken about this. Real Vallecano, the only other team other than River Plate that we've covered, I can think of and find that plays with a sash, and also a blood red sash. I keep getting my sashes and Guns N' Roses guitarist mixed up. Sash that runs across the shirt. Real Vallecano also have the red one. But yeah, that's the first time that it's seen, and it's a thing of beauty. But it really becomes that thing of beauty when colour TV is a regular visitor in our living rooms.
As we come to talk about the 1970 World Cup, which is really the birthplace of it, and I think alongside Pot Black, it's probably the fundamental.
You just reminded me of one of my favourite commentaries. I think it was the great Ted Lowe. You know exactly what I'm going to say. So it's really like the advent of colour TV. People still had black and white screens. Ted Lowe to the viewing public describes, for you, those of you watching in black and white, the yellow ball is tucked behind the brown ball. Yes.
It's just too good. So yes, we get the colour of the 70s, and that sort of brings it out. But I was thinking about this team, I think, and certainly my perception of Peru, and a lot of that comes from the 78 World Cup, is that Peru are underdogs. They're a small team punching above their weight. But actually, there is an argument, isn't there, that Peru are football underachievers given the size of the country.
Yeah, I think that's a fair tag, actually, especially if you we shouldn't really compare them against the miracle of Uruguay. Yeah. But let's do that anyway. So continentally, they come from the same place. There's similarities in the social and cultural context of Peru and Uruguay, even though they're opposite sides. They have different oceans on that massive continent of South America. But Uruguay, as we know, was punched way above their weight. A population of around 2-3 million through the history of the 19th century, where they were winning trophies. Peru, 10-15 million, so almost 5 times as many people. Now, Peru geographically is a lot bigger, but Peru, like Uruguay, football grew in the Lima area, the capital. That's where football began, and that's where it grew out from with the working classes. So that's where the 2 biggest clubs come from, Alianza and Universitario, both come from the Lima area. Uruguay, they also have Peñarol and Nacional that come from Montevideo. But yeah, the clubs have won World Club tournaments. The national team has been an absolute superstar. 2 World Cups, 2 Olympic Games, and still to this day qualifying for the latter stages of the World Cup, whereby Peru from 1982 onwards had a bit of a hiatus with the World Cup.
I think it's definitely true. Uruguay not only punching above their weight, also punching the ball off the goal line when they need to. Yes, I think you can definitely make that case. Peru, and even if Uruguay, an exception, you just can't really compare with. They're kind of the New Zealand of rugby, aren't they? New Zealand are the New Zealand of rugby. Uruguay are the New Zealand of football.
Yeah,
that makes more sense.
I think that makes sense. Let's go with that. But I mean, South America is an incredible continent because it's huge. It's absolutely, as we know. I mean, this is not a geography lesson. It's a huge continent, but there are only really a handful of teams. I mean, if you count Venezuela, I think you've got 10 national teams. Venezuela primarily was baseball. They're now becoming more specialized in football, and we may see them at the World Cup finals in 2026 for the very first time, which would be super exciting. But South America generally produces some fantastic footballers and some fantastic football teams, but it's dominated by the big 3.
Yeah, and that you're absolutely right. It's probably unfair to, if you're basing your view on Peru's success rate on how many World Cups they've entered. For many years, there have only been 3-4 spaces available for South American teams in the World Cup.
Yeah, primarily the World Cup was generally Europe and South America. So, yeah, South America has always had from a percentage perspective in terms of the volume of teams in South America, have always hit 40% and above in terms of teams that can qualify from that particular continent. But obviously that's changed on the years gone by. The 1970 World Cup, which we'll get to, is the advent of when we're seeing teams from Africa and Asia on a more regular basis that entered the World Cup. I mean, that goes all the way back in the history, but it's a bit more sporadic. Logistics played a part in it. But from 1970 onwards, it becomes the mainstay. We're seeing teams from Asia, Africa, taking part in the tournament.
And also worth saying, if we could compare them to Chile, for example, which is a smaller country and has been to 9 World Cups, hosted a World Cup, and got, achieved arguably more than Peru over that period.
Yeah, I mean, Chile have won a couple of Copa Americas in recent years as well. I think they won a couple back-to-back Copa Americas, which is a South American championship. Yeah, Chile definitely, it's a good comparison, actually. One of the weirdest shaped countries in the world. This is becoming a geography.
It is. In fact, we should have had a man behind us. We could have had, and you could have stood up and actually explained. If you look at, so yes, I think you could argue that Peru arguably could have done more over the years, but certainly the period which we're focusing on now, where they have done the most of their work, is really the 70s, and the 1970 World Cup is where it begins, and where you start to see, and there's probably 3 players we're going to talk about a fair bit, all of whom make their first appearance in this iconic World Cup of the 1970s. So that's the centre-back Héctor Chumpitaz, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Well, in fact, I'm not going to pronounce any of these, probably. Hugo Soto and Teófilo Cubillas.
Cubillas, Cubillas is the surname, and that's the more famous. Yeah, but I think it's Teodoro. Teodoro. I don't know.
Cubillas.
Cubillas is good, and I think we'll agree on Chumpitaz.
Yeah, Chumpitaz.
Because it just rolls off nicely.
Yeah, definitely. So those 3 players are quite iconic, and there are obviously other players in that squad over the 2 World Cups, but they are central to everything that happens over these 2 World Cups. Now, 1970 World Cup in Mexico, being a tournament in Latin America, that was definitely a thing, much more of a thing back in the earlier days of the World Cups, where European teams thrived when the World Cup was hosted in Europe, and South American teams were hosted in South America. So, once they've got into the tournament, perhaps it isn't a surprise that Peru's 2 best tournaments are when it's in South America, because I guess the travel, as we discussed with the 1978 World Cup in Scotland's lengthy journey, just even getting there is arduous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, up until I think Germany winning the World Cup in Brazil in 2014, I don't think a European team had succeeded. Doing this off the top of my head, my memory. Brazil had definitely succeeded in Europe. They won in Sweden. They also won in Japan and Korea when it was held there. And we know Argentina succeeded in Asia as well recently. But yeah, it used to be the trade-off. I don't know whether it's something in the air, something in the balls, something. But I mean, Mexico's that it's not part of South America.
Yeah,
and it's North America, but it's not the United States. It kind of sits in that middle belt. I mean, Mexico is definitely something we should talk about at some point, because an incredibly rich history of football. I mean, we're talking about Peru as perennial underachievers, upsetting the Mexicans here, and I apologize.
Yeah,
but I mean, Mexico never got to a World Cup semi-final, and they never have. I think they did 5 or 6 World Cup quarterfinals on the bounce, and they just couldn't win that elusive 6th game. Incredible nation. But yeah, I think it definitely plays into history tells us definitely plays into the favour. And and as we've mentioned, this whole World Cup is the birth of the relationship with football and television. I think it's when television realises that it can use football for its big advantage. This is a massive commercial opportunity. And I think what we see now in the modern world in football starts with Mexico 1970, the World Cup, colour TV, beautiful gold Brazilian shirts and wonderful red sashes on the Peruvian shirts.
You're absolutely, Mexico, by the way, you're absolutely right. In another life, where we were categorising awards based on where they geographically came from. Mexico's always a Latin America.
Latin America.
Always got Latin
I
America.
like
That kind of
That's good, yeah. Very
that
good.
gets you out of a bit of trouble, but still not totally. And that's even before you get to is Turkey in Europe or Asia. Yeah, that 70 World Cup is quite something. So obviously we have covered the Brazil side, so we're not going to talk about how great they were in this one. But that World Cup does have the first kind of colour television's there for the first time. You've got that brilliant sound almost through a telephone line, which adds a kind of exotic background to it. Exactly as you say, I think suddenly seeing that Peruvian kit, the sash appearing there, just added a certain exoticness to the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, the whole World Cup is exotic though, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, Peru in this beautiful kit definitely stand out. And they do pretty well. They get through their group. They're in a tough group with West Germany, the previous runners-up in 1966. They're in a group with Bulgaria. The Bulgarians are pretty tasty as a footballing nation and a team. And they're with Morocco at their very first World Cup, football mad Morocco. And Peru come through. They lose to Germany, but they win the other two games and they come through the group. This is when the format was nice and simple, Graham. We love it. 16 teams.
16 teams.
4 groups of 4. Top 2 go through to a final 8. And then it's a straight knockout to the final. It's perfection. Everything about the 1970 World Cup is absolute perfection.
Yeah. We talked about some of the players, but it's Cubillas who really starts. He scores in every game all the way through. So he scores 4 goals in those 3 group stages, and then they get through to the quarterfinal where they're unlucky enough to play that Brazil side, and actually they fare pretty well against them as well.
Yeah, they lose out 4-2. I mean, it's Pele's Brazil. It's a beautiful Brazil. They have a fair account of themselves. They can lose out 4-2, but yeah, they are playing an exceptionally wonderful football team.
Cubillas scores again, so he ends the World Cup with 5 goals, and he picks up the bronze boot, and he picks up. Well, there are 2 honours you get, as Nicky Butt knows. One is the bronze boot, and the other is a compliment from Pele. And Pele picked Cubillas out as a star after this tournament. So there you go. You've got the backing from the great man, and you've got 5 goals in the World Cup. A feat that he is to achieve again.
He does, yeah, in 78. And you shared a stat with me that I was completely oblivious to, and it's quite wonderful. So, I mean, the light is on you.
Well, yeah. So, obviously, at the start of this season, we did Germany at the World Cup in 2006, and we talked quite a lot about Miroslav Klose, who, of course, is the man with the most World Cup goals, I think.
Yes, he's got 16 World Cup goals, more World Cup goals than any other football player in the history of the men's game.
But only 3 players in world football have scored 5 goals in a more than one tournament. And one of them is Miroslav Klose, and another one is Cubillas. And the other one...
Thomas Müller, 5 goals, 5 in 2010, 5 in 2014. He is the 3rd player. One thing in the 1970 World Cup that Peru did win, where Pele didn't award it, it was awarded by FIFA, and it was a new thing. It was called the FIFA Fair Play Award. I mean, it's the one you're going to want to win, isn't it? If you're not going to get the gold medal, you want to be the fairest team at the World Cup.
I think everyone wants.
From the back all around. I think
everyone wants to win that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this is a new innovation that FIFA brought in, where they would base it on some statistical criteria, discipline, and other factors, and then decide who wins the FIFA Fair Play. And Peru were the very first team to do that. And it was made easier for FIFA because it was also the introduction for the very first time of the yellow and red cards. So this is the first World Cup where we're seeing officials pull out cards from their pocket and award them to players. That's probably not the way to say it. Issue them to players. Yeah. That's not the type of award you want.
Yeah, so that's incredible. So yellow and red cards introduced, and it does make some sense for a TV audience, but those 2 facts, and I have to credit you with the research on it, those 2 developments are semi-related, aren't they?
Well, they are, because in order to judge discipline, you need to keep a note of teams where there is ill discipline on the football pitch. So prior to yellow and red cards, at World Cups in particular, players would get cautioned, but they wouldn't always know they've been cautioned because of the language barrier. Not only did you have the language barrier between the referee on the pitch and his linesmen, and they were linesmen in the day, assistants now, but back in the day they were called linesmen, but let's call them assistants. You would have a referee from Bulgaria, you could have one assistant from Japan, and you could have one assistant from South Africa. There was no common language. Sometimes there would be teams of officials, but there was no common language. So not only would you have the difficulties of the officials trying to communicate with each other in second or third languages where they were able to, officials couldn't always communicate with players. I mean, if you can imagine, if you're at the 1966 World Cup and you need to issue a caution to a North Korean footballer, how many officials in the FIFA band can speak Korean? I don't know.
Definitely so.
But this yellow and red cards made it easier. So an example of this was, well, let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about Ken Aston, first and foremost. And then we'll come to where the language barrier was identified as a problem and then when this incredible solution was applied. And this was applied by Ken Aston. Ken Aston was an English referee, fought in the Second World War, and he'd also been a linesman. So he'd come through the ranks, he'd done non-leagues, he'd gone into the leagues, and he became pretty official in working with FIFA. In fact, he was the referee that ref the 1962 game between Chile and Italy, the Battle of Santiago. That was referee David Coleman. What you're about to see here is an absolute disgrace and an abomination of I call it a football match, but it's more like a boxing match. Ken Aston was that referee.
Wow. Second consecutive mention of that. They won't necessarily come out in that order, but that's the second recording we've done where you managed to mention the David Coleman commentary.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is true. That is very true. Yeah. I completely forgot. Yeah. It's incredible how these individuals have like Ted Lowe, have an impression on you as a kid and stay with you until you're old men like we are now. So Ken Aston was an official. And he's also the man who created, God, we could spend a whole podcast on Ken Aston. The referees primarily wore black as a uniform. Ken Aston, he is our man. He is the man who created the black uniform for referees. After the Second World War, when rations were in place, he saw a nice black blazer in a charity shop or in a shop window, and he thought, I think I'll take that, and I'll replace that with the tweeded suit that referees...
I'm still not sure. I'm still not sure it's progress. I like the suited and booted referees.
Yeah, and it was a jacket, and he wore a white shirt. So you will see pictures of referees from the 50s and 60s where they're wearing probably an oversized black jacket and an oversized white shirt underneath. And this is the black and white trim. This comes from Ken Aston. Ken Aston, incredibly, is also responsible for the fourth official in football. I mean, how much of this is going to make our final air, I don't know. But Ken Aston was responsible for bringing in in the 50s, the substitute referee. Now, the substitute referee went on to become the fourth official. But Ken Aston is responsible for yellow and red cards. And he's responsible because he'd refereed at tournaments. He'd suffer the language problems himself as an official. He'd seen the players suffer from the language problems. And it was in 1966 where Jack Charlton got booked in the World Cup finals held in England. And coincidentally, the same week, Ken Aston was at an event where Jack Charlton was talking about this booking because Jack Charlton only found out he'd been booked in a World Cup game in the newspapers the next day when he saw it. And he mentioned, I've been booked. Accents is not my thing.
It is worth saying that the referee was English in that game, and it's just that you didn't understand Jack Charlton and vice versa.
Yeah, wouldn't that be a turn? But yeah, Charlton had been booked, but he hadn't realised he'd been booked. And Ken Aston had picked up on this story, and he was driving away from this event at the FA. It was an official FA event, and it was playing along in his mind that, of course, Jack Charlton probably didn't realise he'd been booked because of the barrier of language on the football pitch. So his caution maybe wasn't as clear, or maybe he was a bit blinkered in his caution. And then, so when Aston was at the traffic lights playing this back in his head, red, yellow, he made the connection that the traffic lights could become the universal language that we can use in football to caution players without the need of language. Yellow card is your warning, red card, you're expelled from the pitch. Went away, his wife told his wife was like, that's a great idea. She then actually made red and yellow cards that would fit into his black blazer pocket. So he could trial these out. Obviously, it took off really well. And that led to FIFA adopting it for the 1970 World Cup final, which in a very convoluted way probably contributed to Peru winning the FIFA Fair Play, the very first FIFA Fair Play award.
That is superb. I love that. I love the rabbit hole, and the whole red and yellow card thing is fascinating as well, because I almost thought I'd imagined this, but of course there was a time back in, and this was 1981, a classic kind of era for us. But there was a time where football hooliganism was everywhere, violence was there, and there was and it seems so ludicrous to say it now, but there was a theory that the showing of red cards on the pitch was in some way leading to an incitement of violence by football fans. And so the actual physical showing of yellow and red cards, definitely, I think yellow and red cards, both of them, in the English game was stopped for 4 or 5 years.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
That is incredible, really.
Yeah, it's a ludicrous thing. I thought it was only for a season. I thought they stopped it, but they actually physically stopped showing the yellow and red card for a period of 5 or 6 years. And this was based on, so between 81 and 87. And it just seems extraordinary. And eventually they were so out of line with everything else that had to come back. My loose research says that the last red cards shown in the English game in January 1981 were to David Hodgson and Nicky Reed, from Middlesbrough and Man City. I'm going to leave you with it's usually the other way around, but I'm going to leave you with a quiz question, 2 quiz questions, okay, for as we go into to think about it as we head into our break. I want you to have a guess. 1987 is when the first physical red card is shown again in the English game. I want you to have a hazard guess of the player and the minute of the game that red card was shown. And we'll be back with that after the break.
Do you have a team in mind that you'd like us to cover? Well, just don't keep it to yourself. Let us know. You can get in touch with us across the socials on X or Blue Sky. Graham is at Said and Done, and I am at Couch Pundito. That's on X and formerly known as Twitter, and also on Blue Sky. Remember, greatness isn't just the big and famous. We love a cult classic, and we love a good underdog story too. And also, watch this space. Some new channels coming your way.
So welcome back. We are talking about Peru and the 1970s glorious glorious sides. Well, three, I guess, if you count the 75 Copa America, which we're about to talk about. But before the break, I gave Jamie a little teaser. We were talking about red and yellow cards and the slightly surreal position in the UK where the English League decided to stop physically showing the red cards as if this had a positive impact on fan behaviour. Given what's followed during the first half of the 1980s, I think it can be said that didn't have too much impact. But I left you with the teasing question that when the physical showing of red cards on the pitch came back, which player received the first red card and on what minute? Which, I mean, you can obviously, which means one of two things. It's either Trevor Brooking, which it obviously isn't. It's either someone who would never get one or someone who might get one.
Yeah, I mean, my angle to answering this question, because I don't know the answer, I really don't have a clue.
No.
My only angle is knowing you as well as I do. and knowing the content of these podcasts that we've done, the only plausible answer I could get to this question, and it's a total guess.
Yeah, I'm loving this.
And I'm going to go, it happened in the opening 15 minutes of the game. So I'm going to guess it was early on. And I'm going to go for Billy Whitehurst.
Oh, what a great shout. I would just dream. And that would have been the perfect era. Billy Whitehurst, 87, that would have absolutely been on the... And I think probably the only thing was whether he was playing when we signed him. Oh, no, we probably had signed him by then as well. Well, that's great. It's not Billy Whitehurst, but it is a player who is similar. I mean, a better. I would. Sorry, Billy, a better player. I would argue. Another striker and he played. I'll give you a clue. The game is Luton Town v Derby County. We have talked about this player before, but yes, Luton Town, Derby County. It's in the 4th minute of the game.
4th minute, okay, wow. So the one that comes to my head straight away was Mick Harford.
It is Mick Harford. It is Mick Harford. You shouldn't be able to do that, but then, so yeah.
That's incredible. 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
I mean, he really missed cards.
Yeah.
I mean, he clearly didn't get any cards at Christmas or his birthday. The first opportunity to get a card, I'm taking it.
I think everything we know about Mick Harford is that you can hear the conversation in the dressing room. Lads, I'm getting the card. I want this card. And he's wasting no time. We have seen Mick Harford had that moment when doesn't he score an own? This is the deliberate own goal.
Yeah,
I can't remember the context of that now.
Yeah, it was.
I think was he playing for Derby?
He was playing for Derby, against Luton.
Against Luton, the other way around at this stage. And I think it's difficult. It's difficult. Certainly, subsequently, he has at times suggested it was a deliberate own goal in an attempt to keep Luton up. But yeah, Mick Harford is the player, to nobody's great surprise.
Wow, incredible!
Harford picks up the first red. I suppose I think Billy Whitehurst is a better guess because he is almost the same player. He would be the person I would choose. I think if you didn't know anything about us and the podcast, you might have gone Vinnie Jones.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Vinnie Jones would have been playing.
It was right era, wouldn't it?
What's the right era for Vinnie Jones?
Right era. Certainly picked up a lot of red cards. Dennis Wise. Yeah.
Dennis Wise 87, or was that going back a bit too?
Yeah, no, I think he must have been there.
I mean, hold on, this could go on. Steve McMahon.
Steve McMahon was very good at not actually getting red cards. He was quite. I think McMahon yellow cards would probably be, but McMahon probably. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Liverpool bias back in the 80s, wasn't it?
You know what it's like.
Referees loved them.
But yes, so a lovely bit of bonus trivia there. So we are talking about Peru 1970s. I've talked about there are sort of 3 standout players, and we obviously talked a bit about Cubillas and his goal-scoring exploits. Another guy who actually has a surprising amount of goal-scoring exploits, although, as we'll explain, not for Peru itself, is Chumpitaz, the central defender and leader. He's captain of this team for I don't know how long, but I think pretty much most of this era, from what you said, and is a kind of natural leader of the side.
Yeah. So Héctor Chumpitaz, I think we're saying Chumpitaz.
Chumpitaz,
right? Chumpitaz.
Yeah.
Apologies if that's not correct. A bit of a kind of a worldie really in the 60s and 70s for Peru. Pretty consistent in the national team, captain, leader, up there with the best. You know, the great players of that particular era. Played a lot of games in Peru for a few clubs in Peru, but an absolute star of this Peruvian team, and also I think ticks a few of your boxes. Goal-scoring defender.
Goal-scoring defenders. We touched on this subject when we talked about the team whose shirt you're wearing now, I assume.
Argentina.
So Daniel Passarella, we talked about when we were talking about Argentina. Daniel Passarella, captain of Argentina and goal-scoring specialist. And he features among the highest-scoring defenders in the game, which, as you doubtless remember, Jamie, is Ronald Koeman.
But he was a penalty taker and he was a free kick specialist. And an absolute worldie in terms of scoring goals. But Daniel Passarella is up there. And I think Chumpitaz has done chipped timber a few himself.
A similar thing. set pieces, penalties, took free kicks, I think, as well. And he ended up in the, but his is like an interesting way, because so in the Peruvian league, where he does play most of his football, he plays some of the, he has a couple of seasons of club football he plays in Mexico, but he's mostly in Peru. And he scores 60 goals in about 400 games. So probably a 1 in 6, 7 goal for a defender is ludicrous. I mean, you know, you're going to be getting...
For a current Manchester United striker, it's ludicrous.
Definitely so. Definitely so. So his scoring record is really impressive. What is intriguing is in the international game, where maybe he's, for example, not necessarily taking penalties. I would imagine there are maybe some others who Cubillas, I expect, is on those. And it's certainly in 1978, as you know, Cubillas is on free kicks. So it's clearly well established why he's on free kicks. So he doesn't have the same opportunity from set pieces in the international game. And then, you know, again, just over 100 caps for Peru. I think gets 3 goals. So, you know, I'm not sure how many of these goals come from open play, but an absolute leader and a central player. And he's around. So he's in the 70 World Cup. He's in the 78 World Cup. He doesn't actually play in the 82 World Cup, which Peru do qualify for, but he does get them. They qualify for the tournament. He retires at the end of that, so he's kind of helped guide them through that far. So he's an absolute icon, and his leadership qualities were recognised and obvious back in 1973. One of his nicknames is, I mean, the obvious nickname would be Captain America. His nickname is Captain of the Americas. Because of 1973, there is a special game where we have the best of the Americas versus the best of Europe. Friendly game, but they do assemble quite a strong cast for this match. And now it's held at the Nou Camp in Barcelona. And on the one hand, you've got for Europe, Eusebio, you've got Johan Cruyff as captain of the European side. All 3 of these Peruvian stars that we've talked about, Cubillas, Chumpitaz, Sotil, they all play as part of this. Revellino plays. It's, you know, it is a decent side and quite an accolade. Sotil, I think, I mean, probably one of the reasons this starts to happen is Sotil is playing for Barcelona at this stage. So there's obviously a sort of connection. Now, the game is brilliant. The game finishes 4-4. To support my narrative of these 3 players, Cubillas, Sotil, and Chumpitaz all score. Chumpitaz gets a late penalty to make it 4-4, and again goes to penalties. The Americans win it on that. I just love this. Throughout football history, you get these occasional times where you get these high stakes kind of friendlies. So you have this big one. You got these amazing stars playing. I assume Pelé was unavailable because Santos were out somewhere else in the world playing.
They were on their world tour somewhere.
So they couldn't get Pelé for the gig, but it's really quite an impressive showing. When I mentioned this to you in off air beforehand, off air, is that right? In normal life, you kind of then remembered the game in 1987 in England.
Yeah, so I didn't know anything about this America's 11 versus Europe 11, I think Barcelona's anniversary. And so it was a new one on me. But I mean, what came to my mind immediately when we were prepping for this, and you mentioned it, was I remember as a kid in 1987, the Football League celebrated its 100 years. And they did this by having it wasn't an English Football League team. So it wasn't just English players, because Osvaldo Ardiles played for the FA, the English team, and a World 11. And Diego Maradona was in the World 11 with Gary Lineker as well in this World 11, because at the time Lineker was out in Spain playing for Barcelona. So immediately I thought, oh, wow, that reminds me when I was a kid, because they stayed close to where I lived. And I was able to go to the hotel and visit the players. And, as a 14, 15-year-old, whatever I was back then, just a giddy teenager seeing these world superstars buzzing around me, you know, going off to Wembley Stadium to play in this special match. And it did seem to happen quite often. I think, you know, with the advent of Soccer Aid, these things don't seem to happen anymore. They've become a bigger thing than they probably need to be. But yeah, that's what came to my mind straight away. And then you surprised me and trumped me.
I did trump you because I did go to the game. I sort of went to the game. This was a period. There was a tiny little house in glorious days where me and some friends managed to get on some gig where we were stewarding at Wembley. So we went to a whole series of games at Wembley stewarding. So we got in for free. Apart from we got paid for it. And for the first few games we did, it was brilliant because they basically said you only had to, you could watch the game, but you just had to turn around and face the fans for the last 5 minutes or so. So you could watch most of the games, and then as we were doing it more, they eventually said, no, you've got to be watching the fans the whole game. You haven't come here to watch the football, which oddly then became less appealing. So as part of that, that was one of the games we went to see. In fact, I think I also did. I think I might have done the Contra City and the Charity Shield because I think I've seen Steve Grizovic play.
Yeah.
Twice at Wembley.
Yeah,
which is odd. Steve Grizovic is the reserve keeper, I think, in this game, or is among the things. But yeah, and exactly the same. It's an incredible. It is worth just taking a moment to just go through some of the players in that side. So, the likes of Shilton obviously was in goal in that one, but on that one you have Brady and Clive Allen, McGrath, Brian Robson. And then the World 11. Oh, well, Platini.
It's incredible.
Platini married.
It really is. I mean, it's almost like picking a great 11.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And Glenn Hussein as well.
Yeah.
Who was massive back in the day. Liverpool signed him in the mid-'80s. And he was an absolute luxury of a player. They'd seen and Jan Molby, I think, at the same time, which is incredible. Paolo Fuccio as well was there as well.
Yeah.
And which I think he was the brilliant signing from Harry Redknapp. Was it Paolo Fuccio?
Yeah.
Where he refused to play because he wasn't given the number 10 squad number. And he had to wear number 16. So he decided that was his West Ham career over because he couldn't get the shirt number he wanted. But yeah, an incredible team. Platini and Maradona in the same team.
Yeah.
Incredible. 2 number 10s. I wonder what shape they played. Probably 4-4-2.
Yeah.
Who was the coach?
Oh, that's a good thought.
Oh, of course it was. I mean, everything leads to every podcast we've done so far.
Yeah.
1986, 1987. Who's going to be the coach? Who's plying their trade out in Spain? Trying to win a European Cup for the first time. El Tel. Terry Venables and Bobby Robson.
Josimar, of course.
Josimar, yeah.
Off the back of
beautiful goal
off the back of it, yeah. I think his selection is entirely off the back of that goal.
Yeah, probably Igor Belanov as well, because he was in there, and also a player hopefully we'll get to talk about at some point in a future pod, Elkjær from Denmark. Yeah, I mean, it really was the glory days of the 1986 World Cup, wasn't it?
And Gary Lineker.
With Kenny Sampson.
Yeah, Kenny Sampson. But Gary
Lineker was hot property.
Yeah.
He just won the Golden Boot.
Yeah, so but extraordinarily, Gary Lineker plays for the rest of the world.
Yeah, absolutely that. I mean, that's the point. It was a Football League 11, but yeah. And I'm thinking Kenny Sampson's in there, isn't he?
Yeah, Kenny Sampson.
Yeah, Kenny Sampson. There you go, lining up against Michel Platini. Incredible.
And my memory was being among a bunch of people mobbing Michel Platini in the car park afterwards. Where,
really?
We were waiting for our bus or whatever, or lift back, wherever we were getting back from that. And Platini walked through the car park after the game.
Wow.
George Best walked through as well. He wasn't playing at this stage, but George Best walked. And unlike Platini, obviously had kind of a mob of people with him, but Best was just roving around.
I saw George Best play in one of these type games. So Wycombe Wanderers, as we know, a connection with, played briefly as a youth and reserve team player. And in my time there, Wycombe Wanderers were moving from what was the slopey pitch, Lokes Park, to where they play their games now, Adams Park. And they commemorated this with a game, Wycombe Wanderers versus kind of like a world. And because Martin O'Neill was manager of Wycombe at the time, his second job as a football manager, well connected. George Best played in that game and he scored the final goals. some crazy score like 8-3 or 8-4. But yeah, I was at that game in similar vein. These one-off games where you get a random bunch of stars playing at the same time. But Michel Platini, incredible. I mean, what a shame this guy went into the political football world. He just absolutely stained
Destroyed
a glorious
it.
football career as a player, because now he's remembered as an
administrator. I think all you need to know is we remember him as an administrator, and I think that's a euphemism we can use for many. Sepp Blatter is also an administrator.
Yes,
I think that'll become our legal word of choice. I mean, we should get back to talking about Peru, but I will mention that just because I like the irony of this is that I met George Best twice. I've seen him twice. Second time was at George Best International Airport.
Oh, wow!
and so it's quite. I think this is a claim to fame to have met someone who is named after the airport, in the airport. I can't remember if it was already George Best Airport by then.
That is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Not just meeting George Best, but in the airport named after him.
Well, I mean, it's possible that he just hung around there.
I'm guessing this is after his football career.
Yeah, and in fairness...
But he was rocking up on Soccer Saturday on a regular basis.
This was in the period where he was on the straight and narrow and relatively clean. So he wasn't, it wasn't like we met him in the bar.
Did you talk to him?
We just did a high, a bunch of us. So we did and that was kind of it. Oh yeah, we talked about Sotil, who is we haven't talked about, but I mentioned him. Now he is interesting. He joins Barcelona in '73, and actually has 3 very successful years there. So he's there. He links up with Johan Cruyff. There are 2 overseas players there, and whilst he's there, he joins them. They win the first La Liga for 14 years or so. Very successful spell there. He kind of loses his place when they sign Johan Neeskens, but very successful period there. Really interesting player. Really interesting. One of them is that so incredibly, Sotil make a film of his life, a film called Cholo, which is after his nickname, El Cholo. What
does that stand for? Do you know?
I don't fully know. I think it might be something like a locomotive or...
okay.
But I've also read it doesn't really stand for anything other than that it's a kind of... a noise that is made by the fans to kind of support the player. But he was known as El Cholo. And there's a film was made. Extraordinarily, it is made in 1972. So this is before...
Wow.
This is before he goes on to Barcelona.
Yeah.
And this is off the back of, relatively limited success. So I don't know enough about this film other than it exists. I think he might be in it in some way as well. But yeah, Sotil has a film made of him before half of his career has even happened. Goes on very successful at Barcelona. When he's at Barcelona, he's still at Barcelona for the 1975 Copa America. And fair play to Sotil, who produces, I think, one of the greatest mic drop moments of all time, because...
Which is?
Well, it is. He only plays one game in that tournament. He plays in the final.
Fantastic.
And... that in itself would be enough. But there's only one goal in the final. There's only one player who scores. Sotil comes in, scores the winning goal, goes again. It's quite something, isn't it?
Turns up for the final, scores the winning goal. One game, one goal, wins the cup, goes back to Barcelona. But you're right, that is a pretty fantastic mic drop.
It's quite impressive. 75. So this is an interesting win of the Copa America, not only because Peru don't do it very often, but also this 75 is kind of the revamp of the tournament, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm just trying to get my head around the mic drop. I'm trying to think of a comparison. I can't think of any, but I think I can think of a film one.
Oh, go on.
Maybe it's a bit like when Tom Cruise rocks up in Tropical Thunder as the grotesque film producer with the giant hairy hands and just steals the whole movie, linking it back to Sotil's movies career as well. Yeah, I mean, the Copa America, it's very historic, gone on since the 1910s as a continental tournament, completely well before the Euros, as we call them, the UEFA European Championships, which started in the 60s. It's changed the format a number of times. It's not held on a regular cycle. It's not every 2 years or 4 years. Even to this day, they still change the format. They host it in the United States. They have Copa America year after year. Then they might go 3 or 4 years without one. It is strange. But what they tried to do in 1975, bearing in mind that Peru have only won one before in 1939 on the home soil when Brazil and Argentina weren't there, as we've already covered. So the format they've agreed on is home and away. So they play a team home and away through this period of time, and they've called what we know as now the Copa America. Before that, it was just the South American Championship. So 1975 is the very first time that it's branded as the Copa America. Yeah, and it's a sweet start because obviously Peru have got this collection of incredible players, and they go on and they win it, but they have a bit of luck beating Brazil.
Oh, go on.
So they played Brazil in the knockout stages en route to winning it. And they go to Brazil and they absolutely smash the Brazilians 3-1 in their own patch. And then the return game, Brazil fight back and win 2-0. So it's 3-3 on aggregate. So at that period of time, even though penalty kicks were an option because it was a two-legged, I'm not sure the rules in terms of how it worked in South America, for South American Championships, they decided to go back to the old-fashioned way of a coin toss.
Fantastic.
So the coin toss was still living on in 1975. Well, we know it was drawing lots in the World Cup draw in 1990 as well, in the World Cup in 1990 with Ireland and the Netherlands. But yeah, so Peru won. They beat Brazil by the old-fashioned drawing of lots.
Oh, that's too good, too good. We absolutely love that. And you're right about the complexity of that tournament. I tried to look up something as simple as how many times Peru had won the Copa America, and it was really difficult to understand. I suppose what really puts it into context is they win it in 75 and they haven't won it since. I think they've only got to one final since. So, this is a standout achievement for Peru, but this does feel, if you are competing against Argentina and Brazil, you do have some heavyweights there, but it does feel like Peru should have got to more.
This speaks back to the narrative. We have Peru as a international football team underachieved in world football. There's an argument that they have, I would say,
and there's definitely an argument that this side maybe did, because you're looking at a team that qualifies to the 70 World Cup and qualifies to the 78 World Cup, and in 1975 are the best team in South America.
Yeah.
But there is another tournament in between, 1974. So
I know.
Shouldn't they have been at that?
It's going back to did they want to travel to to Europe? Yeah, the 1974 World Cup finals in West Germany. So Peru in a qualification group. I mean, the qualification was quite simple in South America. Brazil had already qualified for the 74 World Cup as title holders in 1970. 9 teams were left competing. Simple, 3 groups, 3 teams, home and away. Top team qualifies for the finals, or so we think. So Peru are in a group with Chile and Venezuela. Venezuela withdraw from the tournament, so Peru have Chile as their only contender. Peru win the first game 2-0. They then lose the second game 2-0. So it's tied on points, tied on goals for, tied on goals against. The only separation at this point is not drawing a lot. It's a playoff. And Peru lose the playoff to Chile. So that's the end of their dream of 1974. But it's not the end of the legacy of where this leads us to 78, because Chile win that game and they have to play in a continental playoff against the Soviet Union to decide which is the final team that goes to the 1974 finals. And this is where the relationship between football and politics just tells us that the two are so intertwined as things that you can never separate. I mean, football and politics, absolutely. As much as you may not want politics in football,
You
it's
can't.
there and it's always there. The social and cultural connections, football mirrors the social and cultural connections that we live and breathe. You know, political activism is something that features in real life and it bleeds into football. So Chile have to play Soviet Union in a two-legged playoff home and away. So Chile have to travel to the Soviet Union. Soviet Union have to come to Chile. Now, this is happening at a time when Pinochet, General Pinochet, had taken over as dictator in 1973, September 1973. And so Chile, generally, people from Chile are not allowed under Pinochet's rule to travel outside the boundaries of Chile. So everyone is banned from traveling. And this is, you know, classic dictatorship. You want to control the masses. You want to control the media. You want to control the news. You don't want people going out the country because they might spread rumors in terms of what's really going on. And what was going on is that Pinochet was lining up any people that didn't lean his way into the national football stadium of Chile. And that became a unofficial and illegal detention center where people were held against their will and a lot of people were killed. So this is all going on. Chile go off and they're under strict controls because they should be leaving the country. So Pinochet is basically, his regime has held the players' family members under surveillance and has told the players, if you say anything negative about my leadership, your family will suffer. So, I mean, all of this crap is going on. This is all a political context for a football match. Now, Chile go, they draw 0-0, they come back. And there's no kind of question of whether there's a couple of things where people stepped out of line, but nothing serious happens in the second leg is going to take place. But the Soviet Union decide, because of the opposites in terms of what the Soviet Union represents and what Pinochet represents, I mean, they're poles apart, right? Politically, they don't want to travel. So they request to FIFA, we want to play at a neutral venue because we believe that the national stadium is being used as a concentration camp.
It seems unusual for Russia to have the moral high ground.
How the world, well, I don't know. Has the world changed? It's all coming around again, isn't it? If we want to compare. So FIFA go and inspect the stadium where apparently there's 7,000 people being held in the stadium against their will. Some are being tortured. Some are being murdered. FIFA, through their assessment, decide the stadium's fine. It checks out. This is perfectly okay. This match can go.
As we know, there are a number of administrators of FIFA.
There's certainly, and Blatter was an administrator in the ranks in 1975. Not that he had anything to do with this. I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form. Long story short, though, Soviet Union decide that they're not going to travel. They forfeit the fixture. FIFA then award the result to Chile as a 2-0 win, but then tell Chile, you have to play the game. So they've already been awarded a walkover, but they've given guidelines that the game has to take place. 15,000 fans turn up to the national stadium. That doesn't include the 7,000 detainees. I don't think, possibly, could have been a balancing act. The game kicks off. Captain Fernandez scores the goal for Chile. The game is over in 15 minutes. It's a good job Newcastle weren't playing this one. Because as we know from the Newcastle United story under Kevin Keegan, they played against no one and they were 1-0 down after 15 seconds. Fortunately for Chile, they've scored. They go to the World Cup. Soviet Union doesn't. Peru is a distant memory at this point. So another rabbit hole that probably won't make the edit. But what it does, it tells us that in the 1970s, politics and football, not only is football and television getting it on, politics and football is definitely still, and has always got it on, because we go back to the 1936 Summer Olympics, sport and politics. They're just one of the same.
And you take it to 78, the 1978 World Cup, which is where we go next. Peru do qualify for this. Argentina, as we have discussed on a previous podcast, the Argentina 1978 World Cup is, I think, if I was writing an article, I would say, is set against the backdrop of a military dictator.
Yeah, but although you wouldn't be allowed to say that because you'd have to say that from a very, very safe distance.
So there's obviously we have done we've done a separate podcast on this Argentina side that win it in the World Cup, and you know, tell a lot more detail of all the various shenanigans that went on in there. But by this stage, 1978, Peru side are well known, Cubillas has scored 5 goals in the previous two World Cups back. He was the same players, Cubillas, Teófilo Cubillas. But as we know, Annie McLeod, the Scotland manager, famously decided researching the opposition team wasn't something that needed to be done. And they certainly hadn't done anything to research defending free kicks. And so Scotland, who actually reasonably were well fancied to do well in this.
Yeah, we covered this in the podcast with the brilliant Stefan. And Scotland was seen as a real contender. They could have been someone. And they were. But for the wrong reasons.
It's a famously disappointing start from, and viewed from, I remember watching the 78 World Cup, and especially because Scotland were the only home nation in there, there's a lot of kind of disproportionate interest around it, and the backing. Of course, you always think the team's going to do well. But if you looked at them, fancied and well respected though Scotland were, this Peru side are a decent side. They're not. Yeah, they're not the minnow. The minnows in this group are Iran, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got Scotland, Iran, the Netherlands, who just got to the 1974 World Cup final as well, and Scotland. It's a pretty tidy group, and you're right. Iran are probably seen as the whipping boys. Probably a straight contest between Scotland and Peru, who's going to go through with the Netherlands. Doesn't always turn out that way, but that's definitely how it would have been scripted prior to any balls being kicked. Yeah, I mean, I've watched. I don't remember the 70-year World Cup. My first World Cup memory is 82, as we've talked about a number of times, and I've watched this game back on YouTube a number of times, and Scotland take the lead, then Peru get back into it, and there's a lot of errors in it, and Scotland do look like they've got qualities. Jordan misses from close range, really good save from the goalkeeper, Karoa, who we may talk about in a bit more detail through this World Cup. And then Scotland have a penalty, and the keeper, Karoa, saves the penalty, and then enter Cubillas with just unorthodox brilliance.
Yeah. Outside of the boot free kicks are a thing of wonder.
It is. I mean, because he scores both goals. Peru win 3-1.
Yeah.
And he scores both goals with the outside of his right foot.
Yeah.
It's almost like they've done no research on this football team during the game. What's rough thinking on the second? Because the free kick's the third goal, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think Cubillas has already scored from the same space with the outside of his right foot. So you must be thinking, okay, this fella's going to do the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem that Ruff has made that connection. It's a thing of beauty. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what sets him out as a special player.
Yeah, if there's any doubt about it. And actually, I think probably there's a disappointment about Peru and Cubillas is that, bearing in mind he scores a hat-trick in the next game. So he scores 3 goals against Iran. So he had 5 goals after
2 games.
After 2 games. And I think it's sort of disappointing that actually he ends on 5 goals. And it's sort of fitting with what happens to Peru in this World Cup, in that having started so well, by the time that, and this a fair play, it's a really good achievement to have qualified out of that group for what then becomes a slightly complex system where there's, I tell you what, we've had one group, let's have another group. So
I mean, that was the thing. This came in 1974 World Cup, the format change, where you've still got 16 teams in 74, you've still got 16 teams in 78. It didn't increase to 24 teams until 1982. But FIFA have adopted this, as you call it, this second group phase. And I can only attribute it to the influence of television. Television has changed the shape of how and what people want. Because 1970, for all of its glory does build the basis of television being massively involved. So people want to see more. And FIFA respond by adding an additional group stage, which gives us additional games. So there's more coverage on television.
16-game tournament, and Argentina and Holland, who contest the final, will have played 8 games.
It's the norm. Yeah, 8 games. So 7-8 games has become the norm, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, television has influenced this. And we know that television influences kickoff times as well. And we see that in this World Cup. Argentina always playing later in the day. And they're hosts, so they want to be making sure that everyone in the Argentine population has a chance to see their team play. But yeah, so they go to a second, Peru go to a second group phase. And again, it's 4 teams.
Yeah.
So
that's the really. So by the time you get to 82, it's 3 teams, and they've changed the format again.
Yeah.
But that's really tough because they've, having got out of a group with Holland and Scotland and Iran, they're then actually in an even harder group because, which is how it should work. But they're in a group with. I mean, this does feel dismal. Bear in mind that you're talking about a Latin American tournament. It does seem harsh that you're in a tournament with a group with Brazil host nation, which has some advantages, and Poland.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, if they ended up in a last 16 quarterfinal, or even just a one-off game, a last 8 quarterfinal, there'd have been half a chance there. You play, even if you're playing Brazil over one,
it's a one-off game.
Yeah,
it's a one-off game, and you can never really fully predict where that's going to go because it is just over 90 minutes. But I mean, it's a capitulation of what is a great team, and that's what we're talking about, the greatness of this particular Peruvian team. They've worked from 1970 getting into the World Cup, winning the Copa in 75, into 78, into the last 8 of 1978, which they did in 1970. They're now these players at the pinnacle of their brilliance. They've lit up the tournament with some incredible goals. And the excitement is this Peruvian team going to go on and reach the final of the World Cup?
And they don't. It's as it's as simple as that.
They don't even score a goal.
No.
I mean, we could probably brush past the Brazil game. Is it?
Yes.
Which order they come in? Is it Brazil?
Yeah, Brazil first. They lose to Brazil and straight away. I mean, I think regardless of what you think may have been going on with the Argentina game, they were never going to win that game.
Yeah, they lose 3-0, which feels...
Yeah.
I mean, Brazil were brilliant, even in the 1978 World Cup, when they're going through a bit of almost like a crisis of who they are and what they are, because they are a very physical team in the 1970s between the 70 World Cup and the 82 World Cup. They're still an absolute collection of brilliant footballers, and they win, feels like a sensible scoreline. If you look at the history of Peru versus Brazil in the lead up for this game, Brazil would generally be winning it, and they're generally winning by the odd goal or two. And then they go to play Poland. Now, we know, because we covered the Poland team in 1974 with Pavel way back in season 2, I think it was. We know this is a pretty decent Polish team as well. And Poland are winning 1-0, I think, Graham, with minutes left in the game, and Peru are absolutely piling on the pressure. They're playing incredible attacking football to try to get something from this game to give themselves a chance against Argentina in the final game, because if they get nothing from this game, that's their World Cup over. And the Argentinian game for them becomes a dead rubber, maybe not for Argentina. And the pressure is incredible because we've talked about high presses before, but this is probably the ultimate high press.
So Ramon Corriga, I'm not sure if that's how...
Carrera.
And people won't know, you probably won't know the name, but lots of people will have seen this clip because it is a glorious moment. So break, as you say, pressing on, and they go on opportunities, so they clear the ball out, and it comes to Lato, isn't it?
Yeah, Gregory Lato.
Yeah,
He's
a great player, who's kind of receives the ball 5 to 10 yards inside his own half. Shapes turn, he's got the opportunity to move forward, finds himself, unceremoniously pulled back as he's making his breakthrough. The bit, and so far so normal. The bit that is perhaps unusual about this is it's not the big burly centre-back who's pulled him back. It's the big burly goalkeeper.
Yes, the goalkeeper is the last man, and he's the last man almost 10 metres inside the Polish half. That's how high the press was. Lato gets past him the first time. But I think Carrera realises that, okay, he's just got a free run on goal. It's a half a pitch, a free run on goal, but I'm still not going to take my chances. And almost rugby tackles him.
Yeah, it's clearly a red card because if a goalkeeper is committing a foul in the opposition half, that's already seeming...
Has he denied a goal scoring opportunity, though? There's a lot of distance.
There's a lot of distance. There's definitely a lot of distance. There is sort of a covering defender. So... Lato is probably going to have to shoot from a fair distance to score. But the rugby tackle nature of the foul also makes you think, well, that's a double kind of... The beautiful thing about it is Grego, he it's his response to thing like a naughty schoolboy.
Quiroga, yeah.
Quiroga with
Because he gets a yellow card.
Yeah.
This is before the rule
before
came in where last man denying a goal score, obvious goal score, an opportunity was a red card. That rule didn't exist in 1978.
And so he gives this kind of schoolboy, oh, not me.
Yeah.
Kind of look.
It kind of makes himself small, bows his head. Yeah. It's almost subservient, isn't it?
English referees are often involved in some of the greatest moments of the World Cup. Pat Partridge, very good referee, but he's the man who only books him. Well, probably the correct response with the rules all the time, but English referees seem to determine, as Graham Poll demonstrated, determined to give out yellow cards when red cards should be in place. So it's a glorious moment. It's a fantastic moment. And I believe that the Quiroga, I'm really struggling on this.
Quiroga,
I believe.
I don't know if I'm anywhere near.
No, I'll go. Quiroga, I believe, remains the only goalkeeper to be booked for committing a foul in the opposition half as a World Cup, possibly ever.
I can't imagine it happens that often.
It's obvious there's some desperation at this because the goalkeeper is playing in the opposition half at this point. Peru, they go out at this stage. They do have to play one more game. Now, I should probably correct myself. There was no semi-final, so actually only play 7 games in this tournament. The top team goes through.
That's correct.
So I'll correct myself in case we don't edit out the previous bit. So they then come into, they have one more game left, don't they?
Yes. I mean, this is the strange thing with this format because potentially kills any opportunity of any excitement in the game. Yeah. And it didn't last long. FIFA did it in 74 and 78. And as you said, in 82, they then reduced it to 3 teams, which again didn't work. But yeah, Peru have to turn up. They have to play Argentina. And Peru got no skin in the game, really, whatsoever. Argentina, as hosts, they have a little skin in the game. Now, they have to beat Peru. And we covered this with the Argentinian one. So I won't go into too much detail. They have to beat Peru by 4 goals. In the lead up to this, Argentina were beating Peru fairly regularly. Yeah. But they were never beating Peru by anything more than a couple of goals maximum in the lead up to the games that these 2 teams had played previously. And Argentina go on, as we know, Graham, they win the game 6-0. And I think we've done enough on this already, but just to kind of put it into some kind of context, prior to this game happening, bearing in mind, you've got a military dictatorship in Argentina. It's like they happen in South America on a regular basis through the 1970s, because we've got one in Chile as well going on. I think possibly Brazil at that time as well. It was a very fashionable thing to do. It was very much so. Yeah, dictators just to kind of assume control over massive nations. So there have been reports, as we know now, that lots of grain was shipped over to Peru from Argentina. Some debt was wiped off the Argentinian central bank that Peru owned. There was potentially exchanges of political activists and prisoners between the countries. So there's a lot of things happening politically between these countries, but nothing beats, and I don't think anything beats this in world football, than the dictator himself, Jorge Videla, who has been watching the football tournament but taken no interest in meeting the players, visits the Peruvian team in their dressing room prior to kickoff to give them a speech about South American brotherhood. I mean, you can't write this, you can't make this shit up. And bizarrely as well, and denied by the man himself years later, even though it's been confirmed by players, Henry Kissinger rocks up in the dressing room with Videla as well, US Senator, Secretary of State at the time. I mean, it's a bit like next summer's World Cup, for instance. This is the comparison in my head. So being hosted in the United States, they may have some political issues going on right now. I don't know. I don't follow the news that greatly, but, you know, dictatorships are definitely on the rise, right? So it's almost like this Videla and Kissinger visiting the Peruvian dressing room prior to this important game for Argentina about brotherhood. It's a bit like next summer. You're going to have a game in the last 16. USA are going to be in the last 16, and they're playing Canada in the last 16, this whole kind of like big playoff of North America. And FIFA is showing the game and they do the team listings and then they show the officials for the match. And you've got, you know, a European referee with great credibility and he's got his assistants and they've refereed high profile games before. So this game's in safe hands. And now they've panned to the the VAR booth, which we get a picture of the people working in VAR, and they're in the VAR room, and there he is, JD Vance, in charge of VAR for this game between the United States and Canada. That's the comparison that came into my head in terms of what this would be like nowadays. But what it was like in 1978. It's bizarre. It's bizarre.
Yes. Whether exactly what happens between them will remain, say, but I think it's fair to say one way or the other, there would have been pressure. I think that's where that much we can definitely say. So, and I just think it's a bit sad that then becomes kind of the lasting impression of that Peru 78 side, or is that kind of hangs around with
there's
it?
two ways you could look at this Peruvian team. You could either remember them in this kind of unconfirmed controversy that the game was thrown away against Argentina to allow Argentina to go on, or you can remember the style of the team, the cubaless goals, the breath of fresh air, the sash, the incredible kit. So I choose style. That's the road I'm going down to remember this Peruvian team, not the stuff that happened in the final game where they were out of the World Cup in a format that was absolutely rubbish, in my opinion. I'm not going to remember them for that. That was Argentina's moment, and Peru were just unfortunate make-weights in that story.
I think you're right. Bystanders are the thing, one or the other. That's an appropriate time we should get around ranking this side. Peru 97, as a reminder, we've got 5 categories of greatness. It has occurred to me in our new setup, it'd be great to have a board with them, and then we could just
next time,
and that would make it easy for me to remember the categories.
Well, no, I tell you what we could do
with the alert.
I can superimpose a graphic, so almost like green screen. So you could do this, and wherever your hands lie, I can put something in play that will look like you are pointing to a chart right now. Look, here we are pointing to a chart. There's the chart. Point at the top. We've got all-time greats, followed by true greats, touch of greatness in the middle, edge of greatness down here, or blinkered greats.
Or we go down the Top Gear route and we physically write it up on the... so you've got 5 categories. There's all-time greats at the top. True greats. Don't think we'll be touching either of those. The middle tier category, touch of greatness, edge of greatness, and our blinkered greats category. Maybe this. Occasionally used, not necessarily great, but without them we wouldn't be where we are today. Which, in terms of sashes... might be a case. But Jamie, where are you going to
go? Realistically, the sash for me that's an extra point.
Yeah.
I mean, that is absolutely, this is incredible. This kit is iconic. This kit comes to most people's mind. Most people, when they're listing their top 10 kits, will think of the Peru national team kit because it is just super iconic. And it's iconic in this period. So 75, 78, they've won a Copa America. We can't overlook that. That's a trophy and a major trophy as well. They've qualified for the World Cup finals and they've qualified out of the group. Their win ratio during this period, though, isn't great. It's back just under 43% is their win ratio. They play 42 games in this period. They win 18. They lose 15. Their best year is 1975, where their win ratio is 61.5%. And then it kind of tails off into the World Cup. And as we know in the World Cup, they actually end up losing 4 games in this World Cup. They lose against the Netherlands, they lose against Brazil, Poland, and Argentina. So in the 6 games, they've actually lost 4 of them. So having said that, and having marked them up for a beautiful kit, the best that I can put them in is edge of greatness. Even though they've won a South American trophy, there is a touch of greatness to it. But I think it's more because of we talked about the underachievement of Peru. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe we've got our context wrong. But if I weight that in, I feel that this team probably could have. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to start us off. Peru 75, 78. Touch of greatness.
Well, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did that because I was going to suggest that they should be in a different grouping, which of course is blinkered great. Part of me thinks that they so I think my big problem with and there is a problem with them being in blinkered greats, and that is the Copa America win. That's the sort of challenge. But to some extent they are archetypal blinkered greats because we love them because of the kit. The kit. So I think the kit does count so much, but it always drags it down because that or not even drags it down, drags it into blinkered greats because that's what blinkered greats is. It's a love of something despite all the evidence. So I think I partly think they absolutely suit blinkered greats because they've not really, they've had great moments in the World Cup. The Copa America does hurt a little bit. So edge does still work. So maybe that's where we need to keep them.
Yeah, I go along with that.
Peru, 1970s, edge of greatness.
I think the giddiness has been dialed to 11 for me quite comfortably. And I think that giddiness will continue because I think possibly in the next few weeks, we're going to be revisiting Manchester United again. And of all the teams we could do, which one are we doing?
Well, so, maybe Ferguson. Well, we've done the treble winners.
We did
Maybe
do the
Ferguson's
second European Cup.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Their first European Cup, Busby winning the first European Cup. Busby Babes. I mean, there were so many.
You could have, I think, underestimate, that kind of Robin van Persie era, just force of nature.
Manchester United's own Robin van Persie, we loved him.
Force of nature victory for Ferguson. So we got all those Ferguson teams, all those great Busby sides.
Yeah. Which one are we going to do?
Should we do Ron Atkinson's failed table specialist?
It feels on pulse right now. We've got real life comparisons. Let's do it. Ron Atkinson, 81, 86 years, pre-Ferguson.
Just too good. Yes, so we will be coming back with that pretty soon. We hopefully will be here in person again at
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love that. Yeah, having a couple of coffees in real life, which is good.
Absolutely. So that's all for this week, and we will catch you again next time.